Andrew McCarthy is an actor, writer, and director, and you may know him from some of his most iconic 80s films like Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire, and Less Than Zero, just to name a few, seen every minute of them multiple times. But that's not all. Andrew is also an author and is releasing his new book, Walking with Sam, which is an intimate and funny travel memoir following Andrew as he walks the Camino de Santiago with his son, Sam. This is Just Be with Andrew McCarthy. Very excited. So we have to get some awkward things out of the way, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so this is not me like fantasizing about many different people, but I only had two childhood, like everyone had a bunch. Actually, I liked Duran Duran a lot, but I had two like ride or die childhood crushes. And don't get jealous. One was Matt Dillon and the other one was you, but like you lasted longer. That sounded wrong, but Matt Dillon was like early.
Well, I like to pride myself on you.
Yes, you lasted longer than Matt Dillon. But you just really, and the career that you've created and curated and molded and sculpted into something so interesting now makes me proud that I bet on the right horse early, like mannequin early. So that's just something I wanted to get out of the way.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry. I've watched everything you've done. I just, in addition to being a heartthrob for so many, you're so talented and your writing is amazing. So I was really excited when Jill told me that you were going to be on this podcast.
Oh, thanks. I'm equally as excited. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So, but I really mean it. You have cultivated this career that to me seems like you're really doing things exactly the way that you want to do it now, where you started out obviously as an unknown, which everyone's an unknown when they start out, and you've gotten to this point, it feels like, where you're doing really things that you're really passionate about, but you still are able to monetize them and have people receive them, and you just have an interesting, different career in addition to acting. Is that accurate? Do you do a lot of things you don't want to do?
Well, that's a nice way to look at it. I don't do as many things that I don't want to do as I used to. You're right in the sense that I'm not a good businessman. Unlike you, I'm a terrible businessman. And so or business person. So I just do what I want to do and sort of feels right to me. And I mean, who goes from being an actor to being, in movies and TV to being a travel writer for, that's very downwardly mobile, and then I started writing these books and stuff. So yeah, I just tend to do what I want, what makes me feel good and what I like to do. And I also am a person that likes as few votes as possible in my life. And so I don't want to need a big committee to approve of what I'm doing. Whereas in acting, you're always waiting for somebody to call you and give you a chance. Whereas I want to do this, I'm going to go do this. And I do it sort of like the books and the travel writing and various things, like for fun and for free. I do them because I want to do them and hopefully they work out, So
you don't crowdsource ideas whatsoever, or do you crowdsource and then ultimately not at all? Okay. But what's interesting though,
I do the opposite of crowdsourcing. I don't tell anybody for as long as possible about what I want to do, because invariably people can kind of, and that'll kill it for me. It'll just wither on the vine for me. I just do what I feel to do. And okay, is it ready to go out and withstand public scrutiny? I hope so. There it is. So I do the opposite of crowdsourcing.
It's funny that you say that, though, because there are a lot of, aspiring business people that listen to this show. And I plan less than one would think. I don't have a big grand plan. I, too, do what I want to do and always have. But I do think about the chessboard. And it sounds like you don't think about the chessboard. You just are like moving that piece. And you've been like, Forrest Gump ended up in a pretty good place. And I'm not saying you're not intelligent. I'm just saying he put one foot in front of the other and did whatever was right in front. And it seemed to really work out for him. So I am looking at
far more successful if I had more of an eye on the horizon. And this will lead to that. And then I want to do that. And then I'd be far more successful if I did that.
Okay, so how do you manage the business aspects of your life and, provide for your family, and who does all the business stuff, and how do you can trust them, and how do you manage knowing what you don't know, because that's as important as knowing what you do know?
Well, I know what I don't like to do and I'm not real strong at. So I just hire people that can help me do those aspects of business and money and stuff. And, having to provide for multiple children and parents and things, it sort of keeps a fire under me to go, okay, what do I got to do next? What's next? What's next? So I'm always thinking about what's next. But I'm not. But I wish I had that kind of vision to sort of, okay, in 5 years I want to be doing this. I just never could think like that. And having people, I've trusted people that have helped me with money and things, and it's paid off.
Have you had a lull in your career, or you have really just one foot in front of the other, been working the entire time? Some version of success.
I've been working the entire time, but I'd say there was a lull for 10, 15 years. The 90s really were a lull for me, in the sense I did bad movies or bad TV things I would pop in on. And it wasn't until I discovered travel writing by accident, which led to sort of a creative rebirth for me, and that led to books and things and talking about it and being involved in that world, that was sort of a rebirth for me. And then it sort of that led somehow, I think it boosted my confidence. Suddenly I was sort of directing again. I started directing television shows, and that led to some acting and stuff. So, success breeds success and stuff. But I'd say there was a good 10, 15 years where I was in the wild and just sort of trying to recapture past glories, and that is never a good thing. And it's just not satisfying.
Right. That's chasing the dragon. Most of the people that are very successful that come on here really are not motivated by money. They're motivated by passion. And that 10 years, did you resent the way that you came into this business during those 10 years? Like that you came in the Brat Pack and those movies that were so successful, but that's peaking early, and then that's a long time to have a lull. I mean, in that kind of public environment that you work.
Well, also people aren't really paying attention to anybody that closely. But did I resent it? No, it took me years, decades to come to terms with my early success and to realize what a blessing it was, whereas it felt very stigmatizing, and I think was professionally stigmatizing for a number of years and for decades. And so it took me a long time to come to terms with that. Really, to writing that book about the Brat Pack and my time writing Brat helped me really see, the gifts that came with that, as opposed to just the stigma that came with it. Because now it's a very kind of iconic and fuzzy, warm phrase, and it recalls a moment of youth for a certain generation. And, I'm like this avatar of their youth. And so they look at me with kind of an affection because I represent something in their youth. You're a mannequin to you, and that's wonderful that it's become that, and kind of amazing that I've become that. But for a long time, it wasn't that. And when it did come, when the term was coined, it was, a very negative term. It was New York Magazine in the mid 80s, which was snarky and very, and it was a real takedown. And, I've always said, Marty Scorsese and Steven Spielberg aren't going to call somebody who's in the Brat Pack to be in the movie.
It's funny because it's true. That's my era of movies, and I wanted to move to LA and see you and live in the movie Pretty in Pink. And
well, I lived in New York, so you would have missed me.
Oh my God. Well, so that was my era, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I did read those articles, and I also know what you're talking about because I tried to do a rinse from the housewives being clumped in. I like you didn't like to be clumped in, and you're trying to do a rinse, so you're kind of not remembering where you came from, but you recognize that it was good to you. It's like a mixed relationship with something. And when you come to a point where you could have a good relationship with it and, just like it's got just like a nice memory to you overall, that's a good place to get. So I actually oddly relate to that because it's got a bad connotation.
It's exactly the same. You're dismissed as this or that. And it's like, well, wait, you're not even seeing me. And particularly when you're young, it's like, you just want to be, that's all any of us ever want, is to be seen, see who I am, And so later in life, with these books and various things and starting to direct and the stuff I've been doing acting wise a little bit. So I've gone back to that a little bit. It's much more, since I stopped caring in a certain sense, I just don't care. And I'm going to do what I want to do. And hopefully it's successful enough that I'll get another opportunity to keep doing it. But the rest of it, I just don't care anymore.
I get that. The least interested party always wins. I tell my 12-year-old at school, if there's a boy or something, I'm like, just relax. It's going to be what it's going to be. It's funny that you say that. And I read part of your book, Brat, that we're talking about, it's so much more than the title, the writing. You're a really good writer. Like, just the way you describe some small nuanced moment in a scene is really interesting. Or when you met Jacqueline Bisset, like, you're very, very descriptive. It's just really real. Like, I was like reading more than I needed to for this podcast, and I felt like I was reading a book. And I was like, oh my God. I said to Jill, Andrew and my publicist, coincidentally, I said to Jill, he's a good writer. Like, I'm impressed. So I like that you kind of have a whole other layer to your life and career, and then that there's travel. Is it that you love to travel? Is it that you love to write, or that you really love to just write about travel?
Well, I mean, acting changed my life when I was 15 years old. I walked out on stage in the high school play as the Artful Dodger in Oliver, and my life was different after that. Like, that's what I'm, and talk about no crowdsourcing. I knew it was so important to me that I didn't tell a soul. I just went, wow, something happened to me. Don't tell anybody. And so that's what I'm doing with my life. And then, when I was traveling, I was walking across the Camino de Santiago. It's a longer answer than you wanted, which is
it's not. It's not longer.
Insane, to like 28 years ago. And I had a moment where I sort of had a moment of clarity where I broke down in sobs in the middle of this wheat field. And I realized how much sort of fear had dominated my life. And it was a very liberating moment. And so I just started traveling the world a lot alone. And traveling, and then it was like my university. I was kicked out of college, and travel was like my university. I discovered who I was by being far from home and alone in the world, and it was and I felt paradoxically very safe, alone, far from home in the world. And so then I just started writing about that, and that just then evolved into books and stuff. So I think travel is meaningful and changes people's lives if we let it. And it's not just about bucket lists and Instagram shots. It's profound and meaningful if we let it be. And so that was important to me. And I felt the same way when I did that I felt when I first started acting. I felt like, oh, there I am. That's me. I feel like me when I do that. And
interesting.
And then I kept, and the more and I'm pretty much a loner in many ways. So I love to sit alone in the room and write. That's the music I do all day, So, and then the thing with that is that it's received and fairly successful is great. But on the other hand, as you know as well, it's like, I'll always be, oh, he's the actor. I think he's a writer now. Okay. And to that, I can do nothing about that. So I just go, whatever. If you bother to read it, you'll have a real opinion as opposed to just some preconceived notion, and again, that's none of my business stuff.
Right. But how does this travel, which seems like, and I want to get to your book when you travel with your son, but how does this travel mesh with your relationships? Because I think about things that I like to do by myself, and there's certain types of travel I like to do by myself, and certain types I like to do with my daughter, not with my partner. And it sounds like there's a lot of exploration and solitude. So how do you pull away? And this is like your city slickers, go find your smile, happy place. Like, how do you get that? Because many people have all these, the kids, the work, the obligation, the partner, and that's your own thing.
I don't get to as much as anymore as the answer, and I got all these pesky kids. And, traveling with other people is a very different thing than traveling alone. And, and that's fine and great. So I don't get to as much as I used to. I still occasionally will sneak away. But like next week, I'm going to Botswana for a travel story for a magazine, and I'm taking my 9-year-old son with me, So, I told the magazine, I go, okay, that's great. I'll do the story, but I got to take my 9-year-old. Because he wants to see elephants. And so it's a great privilege,
Right. But it's different. It's different than it's like a little selfish travel. Yeah.
Of course it is. It's entirely different. Entirely different.
Selfish travel. That could be like a blog or something. So, and also, you've directed almost as much as you've acted. Like, you've directed things that I was surprised by. I was reading through everything about you, and there have been a lot of things that you've touched that I definitely wouldn't have known. So how about directing? Where does that fall on your list of passions?
Well, directing something I stumbled into because I directed the early episodes of Orange is the New Black when that was still, when Netflix was like people that sent you DVDs to your house in the mail. And so I directed a bunch of those, and then suddenly came on and was the sensation of the year. And suddenly I was a brilliant director because I directed and so I was successful then. And so I just stumbled into this career of being a television director, which I did and continue to do for, the last 15 years or so. But I have to say, it's not as, all candor, directing television is just ultimately not very satisfying work. It's like, uh, you get in great shape. It's sort of like going to the director gym. It's like working arms one week and working shoulders, but you're not really doing something deeply creative and satisfying. Ultimately, I'm servicing your vision if I'm directing a TV show. That's not your own show. So it's not. Well, I've come to a place where I'm quite proficient at it. I'm good at it because it's just something I've spent my whole life on set. So I know how they work. I know where time is wasted. I know what one needs to do. And to be a good TV director, you have to be decisive. And I know how to make a decision. And so, I enjoy it, but ultimately I find it not that satisfying.
Right? That's interesting, because I thought that a little bit about acting, because it's someone else's character, someone else's story, versus just being yourself, like being able to express yourself and improvise. And I think about like shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where someone gets to just sort of riff a little bit. So how do you get to really explore as an actor when you're playing someone else's words and someone else's character?
Well, that's entirely different. But acting's funny to me because it's like breathing to me. Like I'd acted on a show this last year. I hadn't really acted in a good 10 years, and I acted on a show for a season, and it was just going back to it again. I'd learned so much in that interval of 10 years of working with actors, and so, but there's something very different about it. It's not like that. It's something very private and intimate with yourself in a certain way. Whereas, I always say that directing is stressful and acting causes anxiety because, you're trying to summon things up inside you and sort of share them in a way that you're both open and vulnerable and yet protected. And so it's a complicated dance you're playing with yourself if you're going to try and be truthful at it and good at it. So I just, I suppose first and foremost, I'm an actor. So coming back to it just feels very natural to me.
Right. Well, meeting you, I see you in a lot of the characters you've played, which is comforting. Often you see someone and like they're nothing like the characters that they've played. So you have managed to have a career where, well, you may not want anyone to know who you are, but I'm not like, wow, he's nothing like he was. You know what I'm saying? Like even in the early stuff, I'm seeing a lot of you in you. Does that make any sense?
Sure, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to say that except yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those. I am not a chameleon. It's true, but I'm trying to reveal sort of. It sounds so pretentious, but you just want to reveal something truthful, so that as you're watching, you go, "Oh, I feel that. I know," and you just nod your head. It's like the same thing in writing. If you can get the reader to nod their head, it's like, okay, I get what you're talking. Then you have a connection, and that connection is all you ever really want with people. Somehow, identification and connection, and we're less alone. And isn't that what all this storytelling is about? Is to make people less alone.
Yeah. Can you answer what percentage? This is like a fantasy stupid question, but I just want to hear from your perspective. What percentage do you think in your career is luck, work, hard work, and skill? Like, each. Is it a third, or have you been very lucky, or have you worked your ass off to get there? Like, what's the combo?
Ben Hogan was a great golfer, and he always used to say the luck is in the dirt, meaning he would practice hours and hours and hours hitting golf balls in the dirt. And, the harder you work, the luckier you get, I think. But I have been wildly fortunate, and there are moments when people have helped me in the most unlikely ways. And my first job I ever got was because a friend of mine called me up and said, I saw an ad in the newspaper. They're looking for someone 18, vulnerable, and sensitive to be the lead in the movie. It's an open call. And I'm like, that's me. So had he not called me and told me that, I never would have gone to this open call with 500 other 18 vulnerable and sensitive kids. And time again, people have sort of angels just passing through my life have just kind of pointed something out. And if I have any ability, it's been able to recognize that instant when someone points to something for it to go. It's like that's in Star Wars when they shoot that missile at the end and it goes into the Death Star and it finds its way down. And, I've been able to hear those moments really, and they go deep, and I go after those things. So that's my skill in a certain way. But luck is a massive portion. And timing. It's a whole matter. The Brat Pack happened, and those movies happened because of what had been happening through the 70s and movies evolving, and then suddenly discovering of a youth market, and then, boom, there it happens. And John Hughes comes along at that instant, and so it's all, and I happen to be one of those guys at that instant.
Right.
So timing
you walked into the right room. Like you just happened to walk into that room, and that room was like
Yeah,
led to
and
a
then it's
life.
also what when you walk into that room, though, because other people walk into that room. You walk into that room, you have to. This is the moment, right now, deliver, and you have to.
Yes.
When your moment comes, you have to be ready to deliver. And there have been many times in my life when I haven't been ready when the moment comes.
Yes. Well,
And
yes, that makes me think of like you're on the boat, you have your net, you're prepared, you're centered, and then like so you know how to go where the fish are. Or for surfers, I always think it's like a set. There's a lot of shitty waves that come, and if you try to battle it and like go in and get beaten down, you're too tired for when the good set comes. Or you could just sit and chill and wait, and you're like, this is about to be a good set. I think there's a million
that's really
analogies.
good. Yeah, I think that's very true. And we do beat ourselves. I mean, so many times I'm just grinding to try and make a not good set into a good one. And it's like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't a good wave. No matter what you're doing here and how hard you're beating yourself up and grinding, this is never going to be a good ride here. So, and now you just missed a good one because you were trying to.
Thank you. Exactly. So that's what I
But you
think.
do have to be able to write. That takes trust in waiting for that. Okay, I wait for this, and then knowing when it's coming. Okay, go. Because often those good waves, to carry this metaphor, are a little bigger than we're comfortable with.
Yes,
Like,
you better
oh,
fucking
shit.
ride that thing like it's your 100%. Play tennis with a better.
Fear here. If fear takes over, you somehow don't quite catch it right, and you can blame all sorts of things, but it's really fear that made you miss it. And so those waves will always be bigger than we're ready for if you wanted success to take you to the next level, right? And I've found myself missing those waves at times because I doubted an instant when you just need to go.
100. That's a great. It's so true. That's such a true thing about it. The wave's a little bigger than you, but too bad. This is your moment. You ride it. That's so interesting. And Kelly Ripa said to me, alcohol is unnecessary, which I always say to her, you're like a little wise owl. So what do you think about that sentence?
I mean, clearly it is. I mean, it almost destroyed my life, but I mean, clearly it's unnecessary. I mean, I've lived without it for 30 years now. My life's gotten much better, but it did. But it's also, I thought it became necessary. There's a certain, if you have a problem with alcohol and you're attracted to alcohol and it's attracted to you and you meet, it seems like it's solving a lot of problems. There's a great line, a man takes a drink, then a drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man, and you don't know when that's happening. Alcohol, it's a good panacea and a social lubricant and even professional one. And at a certain point, it turns in and attacks you. But that point of when it does that is invisible. And in my experience, and so, alcohol is a slippery slope. It's, for me, it was vicious,
It really was. That was during that 10 years?
No, I'd stopped drinking by then. It took me a long time. I stopped drinking in 92. And I'd say for 10 years after that, I was in the wild professionally. But I also would say it took me a long time for my head to clear and emotionally to get myself under me again after I stopped. I drank probably for about 10 years in a serious way, maybe 8. And in a way that was destructive. And so it took a while to recover from that.
But it's not even something you think about now, right? Do you even think about it? It's just like it's somebody you used to know, no?
Well, it just is now, But I think any good alcoholic will tell you, which I consider myself, all bets are off for tomorrow, in a certain way. Alcohol is a funny thing, and it's a slippery slope, like we said. And so, I mean, yes, it's very much, my life now is very much being not drinking. It just is in my life.
Right.
But again, I think if, I don't think I'm a cucumber again. I think once you pickle a cucumber, it's a pickle. So I don't think if I poured some more vodka down my throat, it would be a great idea. Too much to lose too. I have a wondrous life, and I have too much to lose. And
Well, I did not know that your son was your son, and I watched Dead to Me with my daughter, and like now it makes sense to me. He's an interesting actor, and he's got depth, charm, complex, the boyish charm that you have. So that makes, when I heard that, I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. So he's an actor, and
how old is your daughter?
She's 12. It's young for her to watch that stuff, but she watched Handmaid's Tale. She walked in and she fell in love with it. I was watching crazy stuff when I was a kid, so that's okay. How old is he? How old is Sam?
Sam's 21 now.
So he's 21, and have you always been close and had a good relationship with him?
Yes, is the simple answer. Yes, we did. I mean, I was terrified of my father and had no relationship with my father at all. When I left home at 17, that was the end of our relationship, really. And until he was dying, basically, when I went to him. But so it was really, kind of the most important thing in my life. I've always said that if I have a relationship with my adult children, if my children are adults and they want to have a relationship with me throughout their life, then my life will have been a great success.
Literally same story, same exact whole story as the last minute of what you said. So I really, really get that. And do you overcompensate because of, have you overcompensated? I feel like we're the world, our kids, when we were kids, people just were like let out the backyard. With us, we're doing everything with our kids. We're bonding, we're having moments, we're having experiences, we're talking about our feelings, which we're going to get into your book in a minute. But do you feel like you've done a decent job as a parent?
Like I'm present for them and I show up. I tell them the truth as much as I can. And but if I've overcompensated, it was that I think I was afraid of the day that my kids my oldest son, particularly Sam, would just wake up and hate me the way it happened. And so I overcompensated in that. And I think in trying to prevent that, it ensures it happens. So I kind of get relaxed enough at a certain point to just trust that my relationship with him is not the one I had with my father. And it's a different thing.
It's so funny that you say that because we see some of the things, we see our parents in us, whether we, loved them, hated them, so we see it. And I have the exact same thing where I'll do something or I'll say something. And obviously I'm acres away from my parents, but I have that same thought sometimes. And I'm obviously 9 years behind you, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not even it's rational, but sort of not rational because with the kind of parenting it seems like you're doing and I've done, there'd be no reason for there to be no relationship, but it is a realistic fear. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why we walked across Spain together, was I wanted to sort of segue because, now he was 19 when we did that. And he wasn't going to tolerate, day-to-day parenting anymore. So we had to, what's going to fill that void, and I wanted to show him who I was and the relationship just had to change in a certain way if it was going to grow to a deeper level as opposed to parent and child.
Wow. Tolerate day-to-day parenting. That's really interesting and smart. And I've never heard anyone else say that before. He wasn't, because it's true that like relationship from like a baby, for me, it's been like a baby to a tween. Like you're a human being. You have your own decisions. Like I can't just go in there and like pack for you as I want to or organize your closet or make you eat things, That's interesting. So Walking with Sam is the book that you wrote to bridge being someone that you're parenting to being, someone that you have a different parental relationship with. And what was that actually like? How long was the trip?
We walked for 500 miles and it was about a month. And it was, it was life-changing. It was deep. Like I said, I did it 27 years ago, and it was life-changing the first time when as I was mentioning earlier, how fear was revealed to me, and that changed my life. And this changed, it changed our relationship, the dynamic of it. I grew to just trust it more and to not need to fix and have answers and solve things. I had the great luxury that you rarely have with adult children, which is time. I was walking beside him every day for 500 miles and I didn't need to solve the problems and give advice. I just mostly just shut up, Andrew. Just let him talk. Let him talk. Maybe you have one little thought, when I did that, this happened, and then let him find his own way so that he then, one of the things, it's like, you advocate for your children, but at a certain point as they're growing and grow into their adulthood, you advocate for them to them, meaning, I'm going to tell you what I really think here, Sam, and take it or leave it. But I'm advocating for you because I believe this in what you're saying, and you can choose to believe. And so if he knows I'm being truthful and really advocating for him and have his best interest in my heart, whether he agrees with it or not is fine, but he's more likely to come to me and go, like my son called me the other day and said, Dad, you got 7 minutes? I'm like, yeah, go. And he said, I'm thinking this about my relationship. And I just listened and go, that sounds about right. That sounds human. All right, got to go. Bye. And so it's just changing. And I never had that with my father. My father was a terrifying man, and then there was no relationship. So there's no put forward in my life. So just figuring out how to be there and be sort of, how do we, and I'm not interested in being my son's pal or his buddy. I'm his dad. I'll always be his dad. That's what I want. Go out into the world, look behind you, and I'm here, but you go on and I'll be back here. And, and so anyway, our walk and the book was about sort of coming to know each other as adults and sort of parenting and childing and, what that entails.
It's so funny because the thing that jumped off the page was you saying, let him talk. And I find that, how is school today? That stupid thing that starts when kids are young is the worst. Like, they will never tell you how school was and how is that and who'd you hang out with today? How is whatever? Like, it's the worst thing ever. They'll never say anything then. And I find that, my daughter's a very old soul and she'll say to me, can we be present? Like, she'll say that at a meal or in a car. And I realize and I put all the pieces together that those are the places where we're just screwing around eating fried food or just driving somewhere. And those are the times when she'll start saying, just out of nowhere, something that you would never think she'd say. She'll be like, this person was mean to me today. Something that's monumental, like for her to say to me. And you never get that in those sort of proactive moments. So I can't imagine what it would be like to be on a month-long trip and what would come out by just sitting back and being present.
My son, you sit him down for a chat, you never get a word out of him, but you get him moving. And eventually, he had just broken up with his first love, which is why we went on the trip in the first place. He was 19. He had just broken out of the relationship for a year. It was a big deal. It was his first heartache. And he came to me and said, Dad, if you ever want to do that stupid walk you always talk about, I'll go do it with you. And I literally went from that conversation to the other room. My computer bought 2 tickets to Spain, and 2 days later we were in Spain walking because I knew it was mine, And so every morning we'd wake up and we'd start walking, and I just knew, just wait. And whether it took 15 minutes or an hour, eventually Sam would just start. So then she said, and as if we're in the middle of a conversation, and it all would start pouring out, and he just needed to heal and talk, and I was the one that got to be there, and that was a great blessing and gift for me to be able to be present for that,
Yes.
Because when kids are little, we were talking about, you reminded me earlier when you're talking about your daughter no longer, you can't tell them what to wear anymore. And like my youngest son's 9. I still have that great luxury of being able to just make him happy with whatever I do. I can just make him happy in an instant. Right. And that's long gone. It's gone with you now at 12, and it's gone with my adult son. And so it's a different dynamic that has to take its place. And that takes I'm discovering active, choices.
Right. But you're right. It's always a non sequitur. It's when you're sitting back. Used to be able to take a bath, I'd be a bath and she'd just say something. So that's a good lesson. Wow. Well, hold on. You have a 9-year-old and a 21-year-old. And how old's your middle child?
And she's 16.
Oh, so you're like in between all the things I'm talking about. And that's very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Those are you're like in every aspect that's of childhood. That's crazy. What has been your rose and your thorn of your career? Not your life, not parenting, just your career. Like the best thing that you could just remember off the top of your head, and the worst thing, if you can. And it may be the same thing.
It is the same thing. It's when I was in the Brat Pack,
Wow.
It was both, I'd say. Although I find it much more interesting now, but that was professionally, that was, the bloom and the thorn. It is simultaneously, for sure. And I'll always be, it's the first thing you'll say to me is, oh, when you were in the Brat Pack, of course. And that's always, and to now let that be a dried flower on my shelf is a great thing, as opposed to fucking,
I get it. Yes, I get it. I'm having a great time right now. I have a podcast re-talking about the housewives and talking about real normal issues via the shit show that it sometimes is. And I'm having a good time. It's nice when you can have a good relationship with something, that you didn't have a good relationship with. It's really, it's nice. I fully get that. You're further away from it. But also, when I was looking through it, who the Brat Pack was and the movies, it's rare that so many people would have had a career with longevity, and like a roller coaster ride, people have had, have really hit it and then had a lull. But overall, most people in that group have been successful, right? I'm looking at, I was looking at The Outsiders, looking at St. Elmo's Fire. I was looking at all those movies. People have had good careers.
Yeah, people are still hanging around, and that's almost 40 years ago. And but it's interesting because ultimately I think the Brat Pack, and I'm in the middle of making a documentary about the Brat Pack. Actually, I've gone to see a bunch of the people, who I hadn't talked to in 30 odd years. And, you know, if I'd been in the same movies and the term Brat Pack didn't exist, I would be some guy who was in some 80s movies. But because the Brat, I'm part of this iconic thing that happened in pop culture, you know, so it's, you know, ultimately, I think been a real blessing, in which it just, like, if you told me that even 10 years ago, I would have said, you're out of your mind.
Interesting. You were part of a pop culture phenomenon. I relate to that too, for better or for worse. The negatives and that's funny. Like, you're part of something that was in the zeitgeist. That's so interesting. And do you have any relationship with these people? And are you, quote unquote, the one to do the documentary? Like, does it make sense to everybody? Because, like, there was a comedy documentary recently, and Mike Binder is the one who's narrating it. And it's interesting because he wouldn't be the person you'd think would be doing a documentary on the Comedy Store. So are people really leaning in to do it because you're the one directing it?
Well,
or writing it? What do you do?
Well, yeah, no, it's me. I just sort of get in my car and/or on the plane and just go to people's houses and say, let's talk about this. I haven't seen you in 30 years. Great to see you. This is what it did to my life. What did it do to yours? And it did the exact same thing to all our lives, you know. And so it's been interesting. And several people said, well, you're the only one who could do this. And I'm not sure why I say that. But, you know, and there are other people, there are a couple that just don't want to talk about it. I'm not talking about that. You know, the whole thing is that it's what I find fascinating. Still 35 years later, however long it is, it's still so raw to some people. I don't want to talk about that. It's like, really? Wow. Which just sort of proves my point that it was such a seminal experience. And
yes. I'm excited for it. I can't believe it hasn't been done. Like, I'm now thinking about you.
Well, I can tell you why it hasn't been done is because no one from the outside, I would certainly never talk to anybody from the outside. Like Emilio came, I said, Emilio, he said, I would never have talked to anybody about this but you. Like, if so, I've been asked dozens and dozens of times, if you're doing a Brat Pack kind of thing, and no, not interested. And so it was because it was one of us kind of shaping it, because we're members, like you are, of this club.
Oh my God, I'm upset. You don't understand. I've watched St. Elmo's. I watch it now. I will never turn St. Elmo's Fire off. There are only, how many movies in your life will you never, I will never turn Schindler's List off. I won't turn Wall Street off. I would turn The Shining off, but maybe, like, there's just some weird that St. Elmo's Fire, and also About Last Night, I will never turn them off. Never would I not stop and watch whatever scene, and I know every word to every scene. And what about you? What are the movies that you would not stop?
Mine would be Jaws and probably The Godfather, the two movies I'd go, oh
God, yeah.
This is what I'm doing for the next hour and a half.
Thank you. Yes, but I mean, St. Elmo's, the music, like everything. I mean, and the wind in that room with Demi Moore, I'm there right now. Like, I'm in the argument. You're so neurotic with the smoking in the ashtray in the apartment. Like, there is not a scintilla of any of those movies that you've been in that I don't know. And I mean, you were in private school, no?
Yeah.
Who was in private school? James Spader? Oh, okay. There's not a moment, class, all of it. So anyway, I get it. You tell me the minute it's out, I'm there. I will be I laughed, I cried, it's better than cats. I'll be your, like, spokesperson. I really enjoyed you, and I appreciate the time, and I'm excited for you and your book and just all of it. Like, I'm now a fan again. I'm a new fan. I'm a new old fan.
Me too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Andrew, nice to meet you, and I wish you the best of everything.
Thanks. You too. You're great.
Awesome. Likewise. Oh my God. I just interviewed Andrew McCarthy, and, like, I didn't want to be weird. And I wasn't weird because he was so cool, and we're peers. I'm peers with Andrew McCarthy. You don't understand. We are getting fucking Matt Dillon on this podcast, and I'm going to try to remain cool. Andrew McCarthy was, like, the guy that, like, I could actually marry. Matt Dillon was, like, the hot sort of bad boy that I could maybe, like, date or sleep with. I don't think at that age I was even thinking that. But, like, you don't understand. I just interviewed Andrew McCarthy, and we're like adults with kids talking like peers. I lived for him. I wanted to crawl inside the movies and be there and move there. I used to cry about it. Like, you do understand. Duran Duran, Matt Dillon, but Andrew McCarthy was my number one. Loved James Spader too, but, like, Andrew McCarthy had, like, the warm and fuzzy of it all, like the boyish charm. He's so interesting, so amazing, so smart, so textured, so deep. And like to talk about the Brat Pack to what now I know a member of the Brat Pack. What the fuck are you talking about? The Brat Pack was everything. For those of you who are younger, you don't understand. It was like this group of young Hollywood idol icons that got into trouble and were like bad boys and bad girls, but like came up together in this group. And the movie St. Elmo's Fire crystallized it. And like I would watch it right now. I would stop this podcast if it were on television. I would not be able to turn away. Obsessed. He was amazing. Buy his book. He's a great writer. And I loved it. And I'm so excited. And he's one of those people that's really smart and like complex. So I think my publicist was even worried that like if, you know, he might want to sort of get off after 5 minutes because some people are just can't be bullshit interviews. So excited. Loved it. Loved. So happy.